We're having it. Oh, there we go. And we are live. Hello and welcome everyone to this incredible panel today on World Diabetes Day. I would like to start off by just to thank every single panelist that took the time to be here today. We had a short check-in, which I am now honestly not sure if we were already live or not live. So you might have heard some of these discussions while we were still getting ready and prepping, because I saw some comments coming through. But yeah, a big shout out and a thank you to all of you for taking this time of your day. Specifically, I want to mention Dr. Madison Kackle and Denitra Davis, because it's, I think it's 6 a.m. with Denitra and it's 7 a.m. with Dr. Kackle. Here in South Africa, it's 2 o'clock. And Richard, are you the same time zone as us? What's your time there on your side?
It's 12 p.m. for me, so not too bad. I think I've drawn the longer straw.
Yes, definitely, especially on a Friday, everyone. So thank you so much for being here with us. And then obviously a big thank you to our audience who's joining us. And I would really like to encourage you all to please engage, say hello, let us know where you're tuning in from. If you have any questions for anyone on the panel, please ask in the comment section. If it's a general question, you can just ask it. But if you have any specific questions to any of our panelists, please just make sure to mention to who you would like the question to go. We've got an incredible diversity here today. And as mentioned, today is World Diabetes Day. And before I go around and introduce our panel, I would just like to share a little something that I came across. I think it was yesterday when Karen, one of our team members, shared something. It's a post that was made on social media by one of the biggest medical aids, or also known as medical insurance company here in South Africa, where they were asking people about myths around diabetes. And unfortunately, some of the myths that were mentioned, let's just say we would not necessarily agree with those, but it was also quite interesting and a bit of an awakening, a rude awakening, just to realize again all the myths that are going around with regards to diabetes, and whether that's type 1 or type 2 diabetes. And I want to mention a few of them. And I would also like to encourage our audience members, if there are any myths that you have come across that you thought, wow, that's just crazy, or you believed it at some point, please share that with us. So in South Africa and Africa, and I think generally often when we learn about diabetes, and even if I think about how I came to learn about diabetes, you learn it from people around you, not necessarily from a medical healthcare provider. So often people get their first information and knowledge about diabetes from the people around them. And some of the myths that came up was you can get diabetes through intimacy. It's spiritually sent, and these are now specifically related to Africa and South African context. Diabetes is contagious. You have to avoid people that get it. You have to avoid meat and fat completely. If you don't eat enough, you will get diabetes. Bitter foods can fix it. There's so many. Eat breakfast before 6 a.m. or your diabetes becomes uncontrollable. There's just so many, too many to mention, but it was really just an eye-opener. And while I'm going to take time to introduce the panelists, I would really love to hear from our audience if there's any myths that they've heard. And I am just going to start off with Dr. Hassina Kajee. I feel everyone here is very well known, probably within our community already. So I'm not going to take too long to do it. But Dr. Hassina Kajee, she's the medical director and co-founder of Nutrition Network and the consulting physician for Eat Better South Africa. She is a leading voice in lifestyle-based metabolic health. And Dr. Kajee has helped many people reclaim their health using simple, sustainable, and culturally appropriate interventions. She is also a lecturer on several of the Nutrition Network's trainings. We will pop a link into the comment section if anyone is interested to learn more about that. Then Richard, I will do you next. Richard is a globally recognized ketogenic and carnivore educator whose evidence-based approach to insulin resistance and metabolic disease has transformed lives around the world. He has walked a personal journey with diabetes after being diagnosed at the age of 33, where after he managed to reverse his metabolic disease through nutrition and lifestyle and founded his company Keto Pro. He is also one of the Noakes Foundation's ambassadors. So thank you so much for that, Richard, and thank you for being here. Dr. Madison, I'll do you next. Dr. Madison Kackle is an assistant professor at the Ohio State University and the founding director of the She Is Lab. That stands for Scientific Health Empowerment and Integrative Solutions. Her interdisciplinary research advances women's health by exploring the intersections of nutrition, metabolism, and hormonal physiology. With over a decade of experience, Dr. Kackle leads NIH, DoD, and the Foundation-funded clinical trials focused on the therapeutic potential of ketogenic interventions for reproductive, metabolic, and mental health. And then I will do Denitra next. Denitra Davis, MED and the ACE advocator, coach and educator, and co-founder of Nutritional. She has knowledge and experience with over 5 years in education and a personal journey of overcoming chronic illness. Denitra empowers others to heal from the inside out by bridging the gap between misinformation and metabolic truth, which also ties so in with all these myths that has been going around in terms of diabetes. And then last but not least, I would like to introduce Nicolla, or Nikki, as we know her. Nikki recently joined one of our Danone Clinic programs as a participant, arriving in a wheelchair due to severe diabetes complications. However, through lifestyle support, nutritional changes, she stood up from that wheelchair in just 5 weeks. She is an incredible inspiration, and so much so that she recently joined our team at Eat Better South Africa. And myself and her and the rest of the team, we were actually out and about this morning at one of our local malls doing some awareness work where we tested over 58 people, their blood pressure, their blood sugar, and created awareness around type 2 diabetes. And it was very interesting because even just from that interaction, we also had myths and things that came up. But anyway, now I am done talking because I know you are all here for the amazing panel. And what I'd like to do is maybe to start off, and we can just go around and you can make like popcorn. Anyone can just start and go. And I'd like to ask from you, popcorn, it's not keto, don't go and get popcorn. It's just for the metaphor. I'd like to start off by asking if any of you would like to share a myth that you have heard about diabetes and might have believed at some point in your life, and then what changed for you, what made you think differently about it?
I'll be happy to start with a bit of an anecdotal story. So when a co-director of mine, she went in for a blood panel and asked for fasting insulin with her general practitioner. And they said, no, we don't run that. Why would we actually look at fasting insulin? And she goes, well, there's a whole bunch of reasons. Let's start off with, the type 2 diabetes risk or diabetes. And they said that high blood sugar is actually the cause of type 2 diabetes as opposed to high insulin. So there was a whole conversation between a dietitian and the general care practitioner about why she is requesting a fasted insulin panel and why they couldn't provide it for her. It was very wild. This was only a couple years ago too.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And it's so interesting because I think this also came up in one of the discussions at the World Nutrition Summit around wanting to request, the fasting insulin, and, doctors don't want to do the test. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Well, I'll go next.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's obvious, right? The myth I'm going to talk about is that diabetes is chronic and progressive. And I learned that as a medical student. I learned that I first did another fellowship, and then I moved to this specialty, which was internal medicine. And throughout my training, from the best, really amazing endocrinologists, never once did I ever experience even reducing medication. Never once did I experience that, as in successfully, wow, I have managed to get off this, until I came across, over a decade ago, the science that Prof. Noakes was talking about, and he credits to Dr. Jeff and Volek and Eric Westman's book that made him shift his point of view. And then when, as you know, Jana, but those of you who don't know, when I tried to establish that protocol in the public hospital that I worked in, desperately trying to apply the science, practically, and we finally had a chance in my maternity leave to co-found Eat Better South Africa, and we went to the poorest communities. Here's another myth, that this is a rich man's diet. Boom, boom, gone. And within 2 weeks, I was reducing antihypertensives. I mean, leave the diabetes, antihypertensives. And we were reducing medication and consistently do so within a 6-week period. I mean, that blew my mind as a clinician, and it continues to blow my mind that I experience my dream. You think you're only going to experience your dream, you're going to work for it. I'm experiencing it in real time, in weeks, seeing that success in patient healthcare.
Well,
Thank you so much for sharing that.
I'm going to jump in and add on to that. No, I was talking with a student the other day who basically came up and said that we have a lot of nutrition lecturers that are rebuttaling this use for ketones and ketosis, and especially in type 2 diabetes. And I was like, okay, let's take it down to the basics. Let's say that you are out and you are actually starving. And this is what, a lot of people lean their ketogenic research on, is this previous starvation ketosis, right? It's like, so what is your body doing when you're starving, essentially? Well, we're producing ketones because we're breaking down fatty acids. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. So your body says that when you are out of anything that you can put into your body, it has a way to save you, and that is through ketones. If they were harmful, that would not be your body's way to continue to keep you alive. And it was like an eye-opening moment. But the same thing, the dogma here in regards to low carbohydrate diets it's incredible. It's almost demonized to a point. It's very silly, and you can see just the pleiotropic effects of just falling into ketosis, even acutely. And some people still refuse to ignore the evidence.
Yes. Yes, Denitra.
Yeah, I was just going to add on that the myth that I believe for so long is that type 2 diabetes runs in my family, that it's in the genes. If someone in your family had it, then it's unavoidable that you will have it as well. So that was a big myth that I believe. But what I later learned is that it really is an association, but not causation. So I often am saying that, this is not genetics, it's dietetics, right? It's really that we've had the same diet, we've eaten the same way, we've had the same type of habits. And so now we see the same type of ailments, but it's not in the genes. And so that was liberating for me, because diabetes does run in my family. Those habits run in my family. But being able to change their trajectory with the right knowledge and the right information. I was diagnosed with pre-diabetes. And I often say to people, don't let the pre fool you, right? Because we'll be tricked into thinking, because we have been diagnosed with pre-diabetes, that we indeed, in fact, because it's in our family, then it's the path for us. And so that was a big myth for me to get free from that thought process. And so now I live in neither one of those spaces. And I try to help other people not live in those spaces just because someone before them suffered with diabetes.
And if I could just add to that, Denitra, this idea of, we call it the loaded gun theory, and not just with epigenetics, but you have a loaded gun, are you going to pull the trigger? And, teaching patients that they make the choice to pull the trigger. Sometimes they don't. Most of the time they don't. It's what they've been fed now in recent times from even in utero. It's what they've already been primed with, but you actually need to pull that trigger somehow. And what's really important for those of you who are listening, we all know this and we've experienced this, but there is this level of complacency with people that I see, patients, family members, and just the broader community, where people who are obviously not healthy firstly go to the doctor to have the health check, and they run on the treadmill and they go, and they're obese or they're overweight, but the doctor says, no, you're healthy, and they go, I'm great, my heart's great, the doctor gave me a clean bill of health. But there's this complacency about, it runs in my family, I'm going to get it anyway, what's the point? And I just want to say to those of you who are listening, who have loved ones or who know people with diabetes, or you're suffering, I've heard from patients that diabetes is extremely painful. Painful as in inflammation and just general body pain. But know that it is reversible, and really, really quickly. It's simple. It's not easy because it takes a massive mindset shift, but it is a simple solution.
Yeah, thank you, Hassina. That's another myth I think busted right there in terms of diabetes being a chronic condition and you cannot get better. Nikki?
I also believe that I used to believe actually once you are diagnosed with diabetes, it comes as a death sentence. So we used to believe that once I have diabetes, then the next thing is I'm going to my grave. And then we also believe that diabetes is worse than being HIV positive, because that's what they say. They say it's reversible, it's irreversible, and there is no treatment toward that. So it comes like when I got diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, I was afraid. Honestly, I thought the next thing is I'm going to get thinner and die maybe in a few months. So it's just that there is no enough education out there that we need to know more about sugar. It's something that is silent, and we tend to ignore the truth about type 2 diabetes.
Thank you, Nikki. Richard?
Yeah. 100%. Look, the biggest thing for me, which I've realized more recently, I think within our community, we understand the carbohydrates are sugar. And you'd be surprised how many people within or outside our community are not aware that carbohydrates are sugar. So they'll look at the back of a packet and they'll say, well, it contains maybe 50 grams of carbohydrate, but only 2 grams of sugar. And that's a fallacy. Each and every one of those carbohydrates will sugar. So I think for me, it's disconcerting that the back of a nutritional packet has these 2 different variances. I think carbohydrates and sugar are one and the same. The amount of clients, so I work with clients from all walks of life, type 2 diabetes, cancer, Alzheimer's, all the way up to athletic performance, and people with hormonal problems and so on and so forth. It shocks me still how many people come to see me and think that they are doing the right thing. They have type 2 diabetes and they think that they're eating a healthy meal for breakfast, a bowl of muesli with a chopped up banana and maybe some berries. So it's not just enough to have a bowl of sugar, but they're adding sugar to their sugar. And then, it's a croissant at 11, and then maybe some tuna and rice for lunch, and so on and so forth. Each and every one of these breaks down into sugar. And that's the biggest myth, I think, within this area for me. And obviously, the fear of animal proteins, red meat in particular, the most nutrient-dense food on the planet. It's not the protein that's the problem, and it's not the saturated fats found within that's the problem. These are compounds which are essential for life. And, we mention genetics and epigenetics. These are quite literally the compounds that build every cell within the body. And if we were to look at each cell as a percentage, only 1 to 2% of that cell is polysaccharide. The remainder, minus the water, predominates protein and fats. And as you guys mentioned, epigenetics, I come from a family of sick people. I was incredibly sick myself, clinically obese, type 2 diabetic. I suffered with chronic fatigue, depression, anxiety, arthritic pains, daily debilitating migraines that would make me blind, for which I was on 3 different medication. Used to be covered in acne, teeth problems, you name it, IBS. I had it all. My lifestyle, I thought, was healthy. I consumed my brown rice and my brown bread and my muesli and my cereal. And so I ate off the food pyramid, the eat well plate. And the harder I tried, the sicker that I became. And my dad died at the age of 62, morbidly obese. And as you guys saw during the presentation a number of weeks ago at the World Nutrition Summit, I was heading that way. I was clinically obese and incredibly unwell. And I always put it down to genetics. Does it just run in my family? But this is a fallacy. We can't change our genetics, but we can express it differently through something called epigenetics. We can express it differently via the activation of certain pathways and compounds, HDACs and HATs, for example. I won't get into the science too much today, but the benefits of epigenetics are elicited through good quality proteins and quite literally the overconsumption of the carbohydrate compounds, particularly grains, which is the first thing that I recommend anybody remove, by the way. They have huge impacts on causing clustergenesis, quite literally breaking and damaging the DNA, inhibiting the body's ability to take good quality photocopies of that DNA. And we mentioned insulin and sugar, carbohydrate. Do you know the first thing that I would say to a client that comes to see me? I don't teach low carb. I don't teach keto. I don't teach carnivore. I teach real nutrition. And the first thing that I teach them is how damaging grains are to the body. We know about gluten and gliadin, but grains also contain other proteins called wheat germ agglutinin, which will quite literally poke holes in the gut. They'll bind to the epithelial cells lining the gut, and they'll poke holes in the gut, causing intestinal permeability. This is the root cause of all autoimmune disease. When you explain this to somebody, then it's easy for them to make the switch. But it also contributes to insulin problems, blood glucose problems, and fat storage problems, because these are lectins, the carbohydrate binding proteins that will bind to the insulin receptor, and they will signal the body to store 5 times more fat than that elicitation action of insulin alone. And we mentioned calories. We talk about calories reduced. This is nothing to do with a calorie doesn't really exist, at least in the context that we believe it to. And to put this in context, when I was clinically obese and type 2 diabetic, I was consuming around 2,700 calorie equivalent a day. Now I consume between 4,000 to 6,000. And I'm single figure body fat. It's not the calorie that's the problem. And we can get into this if anybody has any questions that they want to pop into the chat. But the issue with these compounds, the grains, is that intestinal permeability and its ability to bind to the insulin receptor, further driving that insulin resistance as we know it, and that fat storage. So for me, understanding the carbohydrates, is sugar, and in modern life, as a majority, the biggest consumption comes from grains. So the first piece of advice I would give somebody if they're looking to help combat type 2 diabetes is remove the grains. The carbohydrates for me don't come in until week 3, believe it or not. And we can get into those other ports of call. But removing the grains, I think that is the single biggest lever that we can do, and understanding that all carbohydrates are sugar.
Thank you so much for that, Richard. And I can kind of also just support what you were saying in terms of this morning when we were in the local shopping center. creating awareness around World Type 2 Diabetes Day. What we did, one of our tables, we set out different types of food. And then we had little sachets and we spooned the number of teaspoons of sugar in each one of those products, and we set it out and we write on it nicely and neatly. And I think that has drawn so much attention from passerbys in terms of, wait, there's sugar in that, wait, there's sugar in that. So much so that one person actually did his shopping, came back and asked me to go through his shopping bags and to help understand and see, and he's like, okay, I got the healthy bread, right? And then me showing him, helping him to calculate, and I go like, well, there's almost 4 teaspoons of sugar in one slice of bread. I got the healthy granola, doing the math and explaining that. So a lot about this is around education. And something else that came up, and I think maybe that's something we should talk about a little, is around, is it expensive to follow a healthy diet? I know I've got some strong opinions around it, but it's not for me to share that right now. I think I would like to hear from you, and maybe particularly Nikki, from your experience as well in terms of the Eat Better South Africa programs and Nutra. Like, how do you navigate that, I almost want to say, critique or defense, which we've heard numerous times this morning as well, like, oh, I can't eat this, I can't eat that, I can't afford it. What's your thoughts on that?
So I encountered one patient yesterday who asked me the same question. So she was like, I already bought my groceries, so what do I have to do? So I was like, okay, you just have to sit down and pen everything down. Now, like, let's say you want to do your groceries for a week or maybe for 2 weeks. Instead of buying the grains, rather buy something like, you go to the local stores. We also have the cheaper ones here in South Africa. So you can just somehow go to Boxer, or you can go to ShopRite, and then instead of buying your pap, just rather buy maybe bones because it's cheaper. And also you can buy the chicken feet, which is also healthy for you and it's cheaper as well. So I also have the same experience when I was not feeling well. I basically it was just like one person income in the family. So we just had to make some adjustments like that. So it was effective for us. So instead of buying that 10 kg of rice and that 10 kg of pap and that 10 kg of flour, we had to buy like the cheaper meat, the bones, the cow feet, and the offals, which was very good for us as well. So it's not expensive to live better and to eat better than is it expensive to eat all your carbs, because you still have to go to the clinics, you have to visit the hospitals more often. So I do encourage most of my clients that whenever you want to buy, you just have to check which one is better for you, either to be a patient or you want to stay away from the clinic.
Hey, I just wanted to add to that. That was amazing, Nikki. You summed that up so perfect. So here in the U.S., one of the challenges that I run into is that we are what we call a meat and 3 or meat and 2. What does that mean? That means that you have a meat and you have side items. You have vegetables on the side. And so, we've been taught you need a starch, you need a green vegetable, and you need meat. And so one of the things that I've started to do is help people understand is it's not expensive to feed this way now, because you've removed the sides that are causing the issue. So if you've been eating a meat with 3 vegetables or 3 side items, we call them vegetables, but that may include a macaroni and cheese, that may include potatoes, and then you have a green vegetable. So if you're taking those things away, you've saved already, right? Just by taking those away. Even with my son, chatting with him about a burger, right? You can have the burger patties. You can go to a place and just order burger patties. I often say that a bun is a utensil. Why are we eating utensils? The only reason why we eat a bun is the grease off of our fingers, right? So why are we eating that? And so it's much cheaper to go to a place and let's get the patty. So just making what I call these ingredient switches changes also what you're spending, and you get more bang for your buck. And then also one of my favorite terms coming into this community is being satiated. So when you reach satiety, you're not going to be as hungry and ravenous where you feel like you need to be a grazer all day. So therein lies savings already. I mean, if you're just eating a ribeye a day, you can't go wrong with that, right? And you saved on all the sides. So for me, that was a learning experience for me to understand that I didn't need a side item. What was on the side of my beef is some fat,
Side
right?
of beef.
Yes, side of beef. And if I go there, maybe some scallops, maybe some butter. But, again, here in the U.S., I often remind people that if you go to a fine steak restaurant in the U.S., steaks are sold a la carte because they have all the nutrients that you need. So there's not a need for a side. I believe that, we added sides from being greedy. I used to like them a lot, but now my sides have changed drastically. Just give me fat in the beef and I'm good. So I just wanted to add that as a point for saving on this way of eating.
I'd like to jump in.
Oh, you jump in. You go ahead, Richard.
Are you sure?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Look, just from my point of view, I used to spend an awful lot of money on takeaway. I would spend for convenience. I believed that it was a saving of my time. I believe that it was quicker to nip to the local fast food restaurant than it was to actually cook a steak. And I couldn't have been further from the truth. But I used to spend an awful lot of money. Now, one takeaway for me used to cost, I like to eat, so it used to cost around £30. £30 will probably pay for half a week's worth of food for me now. My total bill in my local butcher is anywhere between £50 to £70 a week, and it was 150. And the reason that I've saved so much money is that I've come away from buying those takeaways. I buy in bulk, so I go to my local butcher. You can buy very high quality animal proteins at a very low price. You don't have to buy the sirloins and the ribeyes. And I know that particularly from the States, it's ribeye all the way, isn't it? And I love ribeye. It's too expensive for me. I very rarely buy a ribeye unless I'm out. Now, what I buy is a lot of ground beef or mincemeat, incredibly cheap. But also, there's another cut that I'm sure you guys are all familiar with called chuck. Now, chuck is the end of the ribeye. It's not as aesthetically pleasing. It's very fatty and it's incredibly cheap. It's known as stewing steak, but I love to pan fry. So I pop this into my pan. I don't add any fats when cooking any longer because I don't need to. There's plenty of fats within the chuck. I'll add a little bit of water. I'll put it onto a low temperature and I'll cover it with a lid. So it creates its own little environment, and I'll let that cook for 10, maybe 12 minutes. And it's the nicest piece of meat that I have ever tasted. I would genuinely pick that over any other cut on the market. And it's around the third of the price in the UK, at least, of ribeye. So there are cheaper meats. And organ meats, incredibly cheap. Now, if you don't like organ meats, because they can be very strong, incredibly nutrient dense, you can ask your local butcher to mince in some of these organ meats with maybe a 5 to 95% mix, or 10 to 90% mix with the mince meat or the ground beef and the organ meats, and you can barely taste the organ meats, if at all. Incredibly nutrient dense. Now, many people say to me, do you get bored of eating the same thing every day? 'Cause my diet predominates beef and lamb. Now, lamb, I know from the state side, as you guys can attest, it's grass-fed beef, isn't it? But this is because you guys don't have access readily, at least, to lamb. Now, lamb is, in my opinion, even more nutrient dense still, because it's always grass fed, at least predominantly, compared to beef. The B vitamin profile is superior. The amino acid profile is higher in glycine, which is incredibly beneficial for the production of collagen, and it helps us balance what's called the glycine to methionine ratio, which we can get into if you guys like. And it's also very high in omega-3s, 10 times higher omega-3 in lamb fat compared to beef. Lamb is incredibly beneficial, and it's known as land salmon because of its high omega-3 content. So I predominate beef and lamb. I do eat outside of just beef and lamb. I do eat eggs also occasionally, although I have reduced these ever so slightly. I do eat chicken and pork and all these other things, but I predominate beef and lamb. But for me, I never get bored of eating a fatty cut of beef or a nice fatty cut of lamb or some crispy chicken skin. It's the nicest thing to me that I can ever imagine. And I think we are indoctrinated into this way of thinking from a young age. As you say, with the meat and 2 or 3 pieces of vegetables. My beef or my lamb is quite literally with a side serving of more meat. Meat with more meat. And that's not to say that you can't eat vegetables, by the way. There are some which are far lower in carbohydrates. There's a link on my website, which is a free link to a shopping list, which highlights all of the lowest carbohydrate vegetables available. And there are some which are very low on the toxicity scale also. Things like avocado and lettuce and cucumber and olives are very, very low on toxicity, very low in carbohydrate. But there's a whole host of lower carbohydrate vegetables that you can use, and fruits if you live in a ketogenic or low carb lifestyle. But I never get bored of eating meat.
Thank you, Richard. Here in South Africa, lamb and mutton is not quite popular. So in Afrikaans, we say a skaap choppie op die braai is daarom baie lekker. It's just meaning like a lamb chop on the braai, which is like a barbecue. It's very, very nice. I would like to ask Dr. Madison Kackle a question. In terms of women's health and women in general, does diabetes, pre-diabetes, diabetes, insulin resistance, does that affect women differently? And does it have a different effect on their health than it has on men?
If you were to ask the Gen Pop and or medical personnel over here, they would say no, off the rip, right? They have the same cookie cutter response on what they do for pre-diabetes and diabetes. And it is absolutely different because the cycle that women go through routinely, and this is the cycle of life, it's all metabolically influenced. So once you have the tipping stone that kind of falls off the wagon, everything else falls off too. So you have hormones that are affecting your metabolism that is affecting your hormones, and these are just thrown off. So androgens increase with insulin resistance and all of these other things that could have really been mitigated early on. So a lot of times with the reproductive issues, women don't get diagnosed until we are at PCOS or infertility or something along the lines of where something is going wrong in my cycle. There's not enough, communication. There's not enough crosstalk. There's not even enough research done for women to know off the rip when something is wrong. Like, you should be able, I know every cycle is different, but you should be able to in yourself say, I think I'm a little late this month, or this is different than normal. And being different than normal is still normal out in the clinical, any information that they're getting. It's incredibly wild. In terms of the phasic changes, even for somebody who doesn't have a normal regular menstrual cycle, they still have ebbs and flows of hormones, right? So there are certain phases that we are better fat metabolizers. We prefer that, and we don't realize it even if we eat a high carbohydrate diet. So kind of looping back to the last question too about like what's more expensive. A lot of the times we use this one paper that was in 2020. I was trying to find it here, but that was looking at a single family, looking at a mixed diet versus low carb, and it said a mixed diet was like $43 a day, where low carb, I'm paraphrasing here, but the low carb was $50 or something. And we actually have to cite that every time in our IRBs. But that is if everybody were to eat the same exact meal every single day. Maybe that's great for Rich, but like not everybody does that, right? It's going to ebb and flow. Also, you're going to have days where you're a little bit more hungry, where your workouts change your caloric need, where as a woman, your phase changes your caloric need. But in terms of hormonal considerations, I'm so glad to see here in the United States that endocrinologists and general practitioners, OBs, are all working together, realizing that the story is very common and very connected between all of those systems. It is definitely way beyond where our pace should be in terms of women's health. But I guess scratching the surface is something baby steps will take. But
if I could just jump in on the cost, because it's such a big one for me, and so many important points have already been made. But I want to say that a huge, a very, very poor indigent community is going to find it really, there is a cost to food. And so when we're looking at some of the communities that Eat Better South Africa serves, or just out in the world at the moment, there are a lot of people struggling to make ends meet, then yes, it may be difficult to eat healthy. But at the same time, it's more about what you remove than what you add in. So the reason that people are sick is because of the pro-inflammatory components of these ultra-processed diets. Now, for some people, all they can afford is what the food stamp allows them, or whatever they get from people. And so, that's something that we need to acknowledge. We had a meeting yesterday talking about the role, like the meals that children are being fed at school. We had somebody shared, Bitten Johnson shared about how a mother was reported because she sent butter with her child because she didn't want the child to be given margarine. So we live in a crazy system, and we really need to do things like this to speak out against the system. So that's really important. So the first thing I wanted to make note of is inflammation, and we don't speak enough about polyunsaturated fats, seed oils, the ultra-processed seed oils. A lot of these health products, it'll say, and I see this all the time. When we stop at a garage or something like that, if we're traveling, there's almost nothing that my family can buy. You see a big bar that says protein, and you flip it over, and it is full of toxic substances. But people are so pro-protein at the moment that that's the marketing that's trying to push that. But in terms of the cost, it's about eating real food. Like, Rich gave all of these amazing examples of being cost effective and, I always try to sneak in liver any which way I can because my son totally hates the taste. So all of those things, you don't have to buy keto. Please don't go looking for, I want the keto pasta, and it's not a swap. It's not a clean swap. Oh, I eat pasta for supper, so now I'm going to eat keto pasta. No, it's a different way of eating. And I want to say that once you start eating to satiate and you're eating what your body needs, you no longer feel hungry, number one. And so your time between meals increases. So instead of eating 6-7 times a day, you're eating twice a day. Some people eat once a day, and they're thriving. And on top of that, your taste buds change very, very drastically. So you appreciate the taste of the steak and the salt and the butter and maybe a bit of rosemary. And there's not much more that you need to add, right? So you don't need the condiments and, the drinks, because you feel like you're spoiling yourself. You really feel spoiled, right? Because you can finally taste food. Then let's talk about the cost of preparing. You boil a pot of rice. It takes so much electricity and time, a pot of pasta, all of these things. Whereas cooking, a piece of fish or a steak or frying an egg, those are really, really quick. So for time-strapped people, you're working long days, you come home, you do not really need to meal prep. You can literally buy, and within 5 minutes, you've got your food ready. And then the other thing is that we eat too much. We're too complacent. We just eat a lot. We're used to eating a lot. So if you're just aware of, it's not about portion control, but you portion control yourself because you're satiated, so you don't have to eat so much. I've got so many notes here. It doesn't have to be organic. We've got people who have reversed autoimmune diseases, just looking at eating carnivore, and they couldn't afford to eat organic cuts. They just ate whatever they could afford, and they reversed their autoimmune diseases. And then let's talk about fasting. Fasting is a great health tool. And so if you have this much money and you don't want to live with the long-term costs of diabetes, there's short-term and long-term expense, then consider implementing fasting as a tool so that you've actually got a whole day or however many days that you're drinking water and you're making sure that you're having your salt and your electrolytes and maybe bone broth. Bones are almost free. And tallow from the bones, that's free. You can go to the butcher, get the thing, make your own tallow like they did in the old days. There's so many ways. So speak to us, drop us a line and check in if you're not sure how. Eat Better South Africa does this and shows people how to implement this. One last thing is when we did the Eat Better, the very first Eat Better in Ocean View, and we were very interested in how much people were spending and whether it was more than they were normally spending. And people were either spending slightly less or they were spending exactly what they normally spend, because the community came together and people were on this WhatsApp group saying, oh guys, there's this place has a special, or people buying in bulk and sharing, and people weren't buying the chips and the biscuits and all the other things because they didn't need it anymore.
Exactly, Dr. Hassina, that is so true. And you also kind of touched on it. You spoke about women and you spoke about mothers. And I want to tie that into the importance of women's health and women's understanding of type 2 diabetes, of, proper nutrition for our bodies, because often women are the main person in the house that's doing most of the cooking, that's doing the feeding of the family, that's doing the shopping, and yet they are so often overlooked. And I think, Dr. Kackle, I think it was you that at some point explained, and maybe it was a previous live or discussion that we had, about how as you get closer to your menses, your fat burning actually goes up. Mm-hmm. Is that correct? Do I remember correctly? Because I was thinking about Rich, you mentioning, how you tend to eat the same thing. And generally speaking, I'm very boring in that regard, hey? And the same when people ask me if I want to go for coffee, I'm like, I'll go, but I only drink water. I'm very boring, but I'll come for the company, right? So as a rule, almost every day I have my 6 eggs, and I have we eat a lot of chicken in our house, but it's the same thing. And people ask me, but aren't you getting bored? And I'm like, no, because it's like Hassina, like you mentioned, it's like just you get so used to it. And also when you have that mind shift around, I'm eating for fuel, I'm eating for health, I'm not eating for pleasure and entertainment, which I think is so often why a lot of people do go for the junk food, why we do go sit in front of the TV at 9 p.m. at night. So it's having that mind shift. Yet, which was so interesting for me kind of coming out of this conversation, yet a certain time during my cycle, I would start to crave other foods. And then, then I become bored with what I eat every single day. And that is not necessarily true, for everyone or for men, as an example. So, I don't know.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take off with this. But first, I want to get, even though, yes, most of the time, or I guess stereotypically, women are the shoppers. My husband is a wonderful shopper and a wonderful cook. It's so great that he does keto, but he will find all of the meat deals ever. So if anybody wants to figure out how to coupon correctly, he's the best coupon lady. He's going to hate me after this, and finds wonderful meat. So he does the cooking, but he's cooked keto since we've been together over a decade now. But in terms of the cycle, so actually we were seeing in a study with women who were a mixed diet, right? They were doing resting metabolic rate tests. And I know everybody on the panel knows what that is, but for those of you who don't, we're basically measuring at rest. They come in fasted, and we're seeing essentially how many calories that they're burning at rest. We were finding that in the luteal phase, and Jana, this is probably why you're like, man, I feel like I'm craving more things. In the luteal phase, so right before menses, the body is essentially preparing to hold on to an egg, right? The idea is to prepare for pregnancy. It's preparing to hold on to the egg, and the actual need for energy, so the calories that you're burning, increases. So we're increasing during that time. But we're also seeing an RQ drop, so the respiratory quotient, which alludes to us being better at fat burning in that moment in time. And this was all a change from menses. So we're using menses as the baseline because of the reset in terms of estrogen and testosterone and progesterone at the beginning of the menses. So day one, the menses phase is what we're comparing everything to. In the luteal phase, we saw an increase in the caloric need and a decrease in RQ, which meant more fat burning. Now, in the luteal phase, right before a menses starts, right before the period starts, you see all of the Instagram clips or GIFs or whatever they're called of like somebody throwing chocolate at their wife and like running for the fences, right? And that's the dogma we've had for a while. And it's because of the increase in hunger. It's the increase in body heat. All of the things that are about to change because we're about to, as blatant as I can say it, rip a part of our body out for a couple of days, right? So that takes preparation to get to that car wreck, knowing that it's coming. So with that, we've had this experience, or I guess, again, the dogma and the normalcy around here's your chocolate, here's your carbs, eat this quick, it'll make you feel better because you're tired. Yes, there is the ability for quick energy for carbs, but if you are hyper focusing on that all the time, we're going to see that quick energy start to deplete because of our insulin resistance and all of the effects of that. But in terms of just the adaptation process, or I guess the transition between the menses and switching back between being more fat burning versus being more carbs, this information isn't out there. You'll see bits and pieces of the story. Like there is not one paper that puts it all together. It's somebody who says, yeah, we saw a decreased RQ in the luteal phase, but then somebody else who mentions finally the increase in carbohydrate metabolism because of estrogen. So trying to put this whole map together is a bit of a pain in the butt, especially for women who are trying to figure it out right now. But I can and will say that ketones all the way around, whether you are in an ovulatory state where we know that we can utilize glucose a little bit better, utilize carbs a little bit better, or in the luteal phase where we're a little bit more lipolytic, ketones are helpful. We're absolutely helpful. We can still utilize carbs. Carbs are endogenously made, right? We have gluconeogenesis for a reason. We do not actually have to eat it in our diet. It is not an essential macronutrient. So if our body already knows how to regulate and make it, we should probably listen to our body. Our body's been doing this for a hot minute, right? And so being in ketosis helps with all of those other effects too. The brain fog in the luteal phase, the bloating, the inflammation, the lackluster energy, the cramping, all of these things, ketones can actually have a direct or indirect pathway and fix for.
Hey, I wanted to just hop on. You dropped a word that I want to just bring out is insulin resistance. I think sometimes when we come to this conversation, and today being World Diabetes, there are people somewhere saying this has nothing to do with me because all my numbers are good. All my numbers are fine. I'm not diabetic, right? Even if they have a pre-diabetic diagnosis, again, I'll say that don't let the pre fool you. And so you mentioned so many things related to women's reproductive health that are missed because they're not diagnosed as diabetic. But what they miss is they are insulin resistant, and no one's having that conversation. And so we're treating all of these things separately rather than acknowledging that your sugar and insulin levels are impacting the other challenges that you're having. I remember you articulating that so lovely when we were at the World Nutrition Summit, just really diving in deep, right? And I think that's a misnomer. So I want to say that loud and clear that we need to know our labs. Yes, an A1C is only usually, especially in the US for me and my understanding, is only tied to being pre-diabetic or diabetic. But you have to dial back and ask for a fasting insulin. That tells the whole story. An A1C without a fasting insulin is just a part of the story. And what I'm finding is women in particular are having hysterectomies as a solution for what regulating insulin could fix. And no one is having that conversation. We had it at the World Nutrition Summit, but that conversation is not happening. And so I'm working with women, and I'm seeing over and over and over again that they are being diagnosed with fibroids, and their solution is surgery to have a hysterectomy. And so I just want to keep highlighting that today. I don't know when we're ever going to have insulin resistant day, but this is it, right? Is that what we're really dealing with is diabetes is just one reaction, is what I call it, to insulin resistance. There are many more reactions to insulin resistance. High blood pressure, people are missing it. So they think this conversation isn't for them because they don't have this culminating diagnosis. I often say that pre-diabetes is not a diagnosis, it's really a culminating, right? It took you 10 years to build up to being diagnosed as pre-diabetic, but there were many other things that were missed before that diagnosis that we should definitely continue to bring into this conversation. So thank you, Dr. Kackle, for bringing that in, because I was over here like, okay, we got to
let's do it. No, I love that you're standing for this. One of the I guess a little talking point just to send everybody home with, if you have high insulin, or if you don't see high insulin in your labs, but you're like, I know that there might be something off. Look at sex hormone binding globulin. If that is inhibited, that is a feature of high insulin. High insulin will inhibit SHBG. Or in the ovaries, high insulin will go and tell the ovaries to increase their production of testosterone. Look at all of these. So your fasting insulin is necessary. All of these other things, if you're like, I might have an issue, this could be a problem, go check those out too. Yes, it's a pain in the butt to get those paid for by insurance, but it's necessary for your future reproductive health and also post-reproduction, right? Perimenopause and menopause, everything that we go through right now will affect how our symptomologies are later in life too. So prepare yourself now so that you have a wonderful quality of life later.
Yeah, 100%. Can I just quickly jump on that? It's I think you guys have all made a very important observation in regards to fasting insulin. And you're right, Denitra, you mentioned about blood glucose being measured over a number of years, and you could be in a normal state because insulin behind the scene is working overtime to keep that blood glucose low. This is why fasted insulin is so important. But if we look at, and we're talking terminologies with this, insulin resistance and so on, we don't have an insulin problem. It's not a problem with insulin. The reason that the insulin is hindered in its ability to send the glucose into the cell is because the cell is too full. So it's a protective mechanism. So in order to send sugar into the cell, most of it is transferred in through a transporter called a GLUT4 transporter, which sits on the surface of the cell. Now, when the cell becomes toxic or close to becoming toxic, too full, so the cell has grown because there's so much glucose in there or fat, then this GLUT4 transporter translocates into the cell. This is what prevents the storage. So we increase insulin to force this and so on and so forth. And then we look at diabetes drugs like metformin and so on and so forth. And these force the translocation of that transporter back to the surface, which the cell doesn't want to do. So it's not a case of we have an insulin problem. We have enough insulin. The issue, even though we've tested the insulin comes back to the glucose. So the answer to this is simple. We need to reduce the amount of glucose that we're consuming. So it's not an insulin problem. It's too much sugar. And by sugar, I mean carbohydrate. when we take a step back and look at it from a simple perspective, this is a quick fix. And all you guys, Dr. Hassina's just mentioned, incredible resolutions of people with type 2 diabetes. And we see this in as little as 2 weeks. Deidre mentioned earlier that, we are, or was it Nikki, I think, mentioned that when we are told we have diabetes, that it's a death sentence and it's irreversible, we can quite literally reverse this in as little as 2 weeks by reducing the amount of carbohydrate. And Dr. Hassina mentioned seed oils. Seed oils are very high in an oxidized omega-6 called linoleic acid. We're told that these are heart healthy. These are the opposite to heart healthy. And there's one condition that you need to search in order to prove positive that this is correct. And it's a condition called cytosterolemia. Cytosterolemia is a genetically inherited condition in which the body can't remove the toxic omega-6. Our body fights hard and works hard to remove the vegetable oils, but in this condition, they accumulate and it leads to early onset cardiovascular disease. So it's proof positive that these seed oils are detrimental. The half-life for these toxic omega-6s, especially the linoleic acid, is 2 years. What you consume today is causing damage for another 2 years. It damages the liver, inhibits the liver's ability to work. The liver is an incredible, it's one of the most important organs within the body. The amount that it does in the body, that's something we could just discuss for probably 2 days straight. It's an incredibly important organ. And when we inhibit the ability of the liver to work, everything else downstream is affected. So, coming back to the grains, high in carbohydrate, high in lectins. Number 2 on the list for me is the seed oils. If there's only 2 things that you can do or take away from this call today, it's to remove or heavily reduce the grains and seed oils. And you're going to see a huge improvement in regards to this. And just one other thing, humor myself really quickly, Dr. Hassina mentioned about quality of nutrients. And this is critically important because when you consume these fake foods, these Franken foods, which is pretty much everything in the supermarket. Remember, there's only 2 aisles in the supermarket which contain real food. That's the meat and fish aisle and the vegetable aisle. And I no longer shop in the vegetable aisle because I'm now living a carnivore lifestyle, but that is through a series of incremental changes. But 2 aisles, everything else are fake foods, Franken foods, full of man-made toxic chemicals to keep you addicted, and which make you incredibly unwell. And it's very difficult to choose the products which are devoid of these seed oils, but you can find them. But these compounds contain things like phytic acid and lectins, which block the absorption of the nutrients that are potentially found within. So it's not enough just to eat some meat. If you eat that with your bread or your pasta or your rice, the phytic acid and the lectins are enough to block the absorption of essential cofactors like zinc, iron, and magnesium by as much as 100%, which basically means that many of the nutrients that you're obtaining from the animal proteins, even though you're consuming them, they may not be absorbed. Now, this is critically important because these cofactors are used in the production of our neurotransmitters. So the neurotransmitters are made in the gut, or 95% of them are made in the gut. These are things like dopamine and serotonin and epinephrine and so on and so forth. So if we don't produce these neurotransmitters, this leads to anxiety and depression and craving. So now we reach for more of the sugary compounds to elicit our dopamine and serotonin responses, each and every time down-regulating the receptor and increasing our requirement for more sugar and more sugar and more sugar. And interestingly, these grains and many vegetables also are sprayed with a herbicide called glyphosate, which everyone on the panel is familiar with. This compound will block the second step in a pathway called the shikimate pathway. Now, if you were to ask ChatGPT, and I think I asked this actually in the nutrition conference recently, if you were to ask ChatGPT, does the shikimate pathway exist in the human body? It will tell you it does not. And then I challenge you to say, well, you were incorrect because the shikimate pathway exists in the bacteria in the gut. And ChatGPT will come back and say, apologies, you are absolutely correct. Now, the shikimate pathway, it allows us to create our aromatic amino acids, tryptophan, tyrosine, phenylalanine. These are the precursors that go on to make our neurotransmitters. So think about this logically. The grains that we're consuming, the glyphosate and the lectins and phytates, but the glyphosate is blocking the second step in this pathway, which now basically means that we're unable to make 95% of our neurotransmitters. Now we see a massive increase in depression and anxiety, which I've suffered with, severe mental health issues. I could not leave my house a number of years ago, and that was a fact. My life was spent living in boxes. I lived in my box, and the only time that I would leave my box was to jump into my metal box, to drive to a big box, my place of work.
I was just wondering, I see a couple of questions that are coming through. If we're going to do some of the questions here.
Yes. So that's the question. If you guys have a couple of minutes more to stay.
Let's get into the questions.
Yeah, because we had 1 hour. So I guess it depends. I don't want to use too much of everyone's time. I want to be really mindful about it. But one comment I quickly want to touch on, and I know we've spoken a lot about the conference. I'll ask our media team to put the link in the comments. If you weren't able to make the conference or see the conference, you can still access the content from the conference and see all of these amazing people's presentations. But one of the comments that I was saying, maybe Denitra, if you want to show us your T-shirt, because people were commenting on us, three of us wearing the same shirt today. And maybe Denitra, do you want to read to people what it says?
Yes, it says type 2 diabetes. It gets a star rating, 1-star rating. I would say 0 stars, but then somebody would think it's 5 stars. And it says that it's way too expensive, hard to manage, and didn't come with instructions. Would not recommend. And so I picked this up while in Cape Town, South Africa. See, Nikki's wearing hers as well. So yes, I'm sporting this today for attention. I hope to get attention. Like, who's wearing a type 2 diabetes shirt?
Yeah, no, I think these shirts are great. So I want to go to I think I'm going to ask one question because there's many, and at this point I feel like we should have made it 2 hours, and then I think, okay, wait, we'll invite each of you back again because each and every one of you brings such an incredible application for nutrition intervention for betterment of health, and specifically related to diabetes. But this question came from Karen, and I think, we talk a lot about nutrition and whether it's a keto diet or a carnivore diet, and we've got actually so many questions about the carnivore diet, Richard, so we'll definitely be getting you on soon to answer all of them. And we have all of these discussions within, I want to say, our community, right? So our community here, our community on Facebook. But the question is, how do we continue to get this message out? Listening to all the media today around World Diabetes Day, it's all the same story. Eat small meals, whole grains, fiber, etc., etc. What can we as a community, and I'll say we, us here on the panel, but also as the broader community, the listeners, what can we do to get the message out there?
So one of the things that I'll say is that as a teacher, I try to stay away from labels. So you mentioned, keto, carnivore. What's really happening is we are removing sugar from our diet, is essentially what's happening. I often have to say to people, when you take all meat out of your diet, all you're eating is sugar, right? And people say that everything changes to sugar. Meat doesn't change to sugar. And so the idea is that you are decreasing your sugar. So the message and how we continue to move this message is helping people understand that we are making them sugar aware. We've become more sugar aware, and we're changing how much sugar we're putting in our diet under the umbrella of being healthy. Rich mentioned earlier, what a breakfast typically could look like is, for us, a bowl of oatmeal, wheat toast, fruit, and juice. That's all sugar, but somehow we've been taught that that's healthy. And so when you remove all of that and have some bacon and eggs, now you're not eating sugar and you're satiated. So I think that's a good way to keep reinforcing this message. And I think Dr. Hassina also said, this is not about what you put in, it's really what you take away that's impacting your body and converting to sugar in your body that's unnecessary, non-essential, as you mentioned earlier.
So if I could just quickly say, how could you change this? Let's take it to TikTok, because TikTok changes the world, doesn't it? And what? Take what to TikTok? Take the patient's stories, because that's, I almost want to say, wait for those people who make the laws to get diabetes, because then they'll realize that all the stupid advice doesn't work. It feels like the doctors and the healthcare workers and the change makers, who a lot of them who have completely changed. I mean, Prof changed the way he thought because he developed diabetes. So it's those, and that's what I see with my colleagues. It's when they become morbidly obese, or they get sick and they don't know how, or they have bowel issues and they don't know why, and they start to consider carnivore, and then they get, improvement. So it's that. And then, of course, I have to punt for Nutrition Network. I'm wearing my Nutrition Network shirt proudly today. Just give me one moment to get our textbook. So continue with the robust science. This textbook was created because we know that people trust textbooks. It is incredible. It has got, I think it was a Japanese clinician. He was able to save his license by using the science from this particular, was a Chinese doctor, from this particular book. And whether you're a doctor, any kind of healthcare worker, or a lay person, we've got a course for you at Nutrition Network. This is why we continue to create these modules, because we are behind the robust science, root cause medicine. And the way to do it is to change. It's, Bitten Johnson and all of our clinicians talk about the starfish. One starfish, it matters to, the story about the starfish, it matters to the starfish. So it's a ripple effect of one person at a time, changing one family at a time, changes a whole generation. And it's just to continue and to be brave and to share and to learn, because when you're challenged, you have to be able to say, ooh, I don't know why, but I'll go and find out. You don't have to have all the answers. You just have to know that there either is science to support it, or we need to continue to research and back what we're saying up with science.
And also the other thing is, here at Eat Better South Africa, we started with what we call the Operation Noise. So we started at a new clinic, and on the 31st of October, we had a wellness day at the new clinic, which we included the staff. So we had to start with the healthcare professionals as well, because it also starts with them. So it's surprising to know that there is also limited knowledge with our doctors and nurses as well. So sorry to say, but what I found out that is it's been the second week, and the numbers are doing well. Like on the first day, there were some of the staff that had high sugar, but they were on duty. And when they started the 30-day green list challenge, the first week, the other one came with good comments. She was like, she's happy with how it has changed. Her waist has reduced, her weight is reduced, and she's feeling more happy and energetic. And so this is what we want to do. Like, we start with the staff, and then we go with the patients. So also, I think 2 days ago, another doctor referred a patient to me. And then also our dietitian, she also referred a patient to me who has diabetes. And when she started the program, her sugar was like on 29.5, and going with time, last week when I saw her, it was on 16.4. So you can see the changes within less than a week. It is something that we need to do. If we start educating our clinic staff, our doctors, try and encourage them on how they can help the patients with the diet and all that, it is something that will help the community as well.
I agree, and I'm going to jump on to the sharing the TikTok. I think we need TikToks, and we need them to go to kids. Honestly,
Yeah.
this is where it starts. You know, the food that they're given in schools, the nutrition direction that kids are given, sometimes sets them up for failure. You know, we see obesity in children, and they have one meal a day technically with their parents. A lot of them are doing breakfast and lunch at school, and then dinner at home. But then they end up with obesity, and the doctors are basically pointing the finger at the parents. And yes, that is an issue too. But let's talk about school nutrition first. And because the influence of all of the social media and these gifts or whatever they're called moving forward, I'm dating myself, that needs to be something that is more directed towards them, so they understand that fat, it should not be scary. They hear it as one word when you're heavy set and you have fat on your body, and then they're like, I have to eat it too. That doesn't set a very good precedent. So trying to change that. Maybe we start saying adipose tissue from a very young age. Well, that person has a lot of adipose, as opposed to that person's fat. It really doesn't help when they're trying to go through the normalcy of middle school and high school, being like, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and eat fat in front of all of these people who might turn around and make fun, poke fun, what have you. They're very influential at that age. So yeah, back to the TikToks. I literally have seen more done on TikTok than I think, no offense, front tears, but front tears.
I just also want to mention, and I put them in the chat, as we're talking about spreading this message. We were privileged to watch the animal movie while we were in Cape Town. We got a chance to see the animal movie, so I put the link in the chat to encourage people to watch that. And then there's also a movement right now, a documentary that's coming out called Healing Humanity, that's with Carrie Mann, that's coming out as well. And so the trailers are available, and they're spreading this same message and showing how people have reversed diabetes in such a short time. So I just threw those in the chat as a way to continue to spread the message and get it out. And if any of you want to teach me about TikTok, I'm ready to learn.
Ooh, looks like we've lost Jana, but I don't know whether she's been kicked off, but maybe, Nikki, do you want to say anything to close?
Okay, thank you everyone for joining us, and thanks to our panelists. Rich, I really loved your fat presentation. It's top notch. And thank you so much. Hopefully we'll see each other on the next show.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Sorry, everyone.
Back.
I'm back. I got cut off. Sorry, guys, for a moment. I just saw something went wrong, and I'm like, clearly, because I'm not in the room anymore. But thank you.
We already said goodbye.
Because I was wanting to just thank Denitra for sharing all those resources, and I wanted to know if Richard, if maybe you did mention if there's anything you wanted to add, just as like a closing. What do you think we can do more to get the message out there?
Look, I think you guys have nailed it, and I think each and every one of us, we're all trying to do these things. We're all the pebbles in the ponds, as Dr. Hassina mentioned. It's one of us will see the benefit, and with me, I came up against lots of resistance from friends and family, but eventually, it stands the test of time. They continue to become sicker and sicker, and I was continue to become healthier, and now that ripple effect has finally taken effect, and these people are now changing, their views on food and health and well-being. So it's just be yourself, be that person, be that pebble in the pond, and create those ripples. And as Dr. Hassina mentioned, TikTok, social media is incredibly important. I'm very active on social, but much of my content, unfortunately, is blocked. For obvious reasons, but it's I post daily. I'm live also every Sunday on YouTube for free for an hour for live Q&A in regards to any health questions. We usually get a few hundred people live on the call there. So any free advice that you guys are looking for, feel free to jump on at 7 p.m. UK time every Sunday. But yeah, just I think you're all doing an incredible job. It's incredibly inspiring, and I just love being part of the community because it just listening to you guys speak about your journey and part in words of wisdom. It's very much a community of learning and supporting, and I'm very proud to be a part of that. So thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Denitra, Richard, Dr. Hassina, Dr. Kackle, and Nikki for joining us today. I know we went way over time, but thank you so much for getting up early or offering up your Friday afternoon. There's so many valuable things I think that came out of this conversation today. And I would also like to thank our audience and apologize that we didn't get to all of the questions. We will definitely invite all of our speakers back so we can get into them. And I would like to encourage everyone to maybe share this video, or maybe one of us, I want to say like anyone else on this panel, go and look at their social media, go share some of their videos, because like social media is king, right? And maybe we should all go do a nice little TikTok after this. I would love to see it. So I challenge you all. Let's go and do it. Let's go change the world. I hope everyone has a fantastic day further, and thank you for all the incredible work that you do.
Thank you, guys.